All right, so you guys can all hear my voice. I'm sure I'm Jim Bennie. I'm one of the physicians locally in the community. I work at Reading Family Medical Group. I've been there for a year and a half. How did I get started on this? When I was 18 and a half years old, I walked through a plate glass window. They told me I'd never walk again, and just not believing it, being 18 and a half years old, I decided to do a little research, and I found out that cycling was a great thing, and I also got into a plant-based diet. Just epidemiologically, looking across the world, the healthiest people in the world that lasted the longest, healed the fastest, were people that ate plants. And so that's how I got onto it, as well as some books from, you'll hear this name again, Dr. McDougall, who I thought was extreme at the time, and now I've learned a lot more since then. So I did very well, and I stayed on this for quite a long time, and then I kind of waned off of it, and life has a way of putting meat into your diet, dairy into your diet when you don't even know it's happening. You're watching TV every night, and you'll see that meat is what's for dinner, and milk does a body good, and you want to jump rope with the cheese on that pizza, and you don't see bird's eye vegetables or ho-ho-ho green giant anymore. You just don't see that stuff. And so you become totally enmeshed in this world of being brainwashed, so to speak, meat-washed, whitewashed from milk, so to speak. So I went through residency, and I knew that there was a big component to helping people reverse their diseases with diet, but you're really not allowed to do that in the world of pharmaceutically based residency therapeutics. And if you could get people to do it, you could get them to do it, and there's only a couple that I ever got to, but everything was based off a pharmaceutical protocol. If they had this, then you did this, and it was this drug, then it was this drug, and this drug, and hence they almost never reversed that. Then I got out and I actually got turned on to this recently again by reading about Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton, if anybody knows anything about Bill Clinton, had triple bypass. And the triple bypass worked so well that he ended up with 2 stents 2 years later. And bypasses are supposed to last a good 10 to 15 years anymore if you do well. Well, he's the McDonald's guy that would go running and stop at McDonald's. I don't know if you remember those. I remember those as a kid watching him do that. And he decided to make that change. And how did he make that change? Well, he came across a book called The China Study, and I read that book and was kind of floored that there was all this data that really backed it and supported it. So that's how I got into it, and then I wrote Dr. McDougall, and he took me under his wing and let me come and see how just a regular internal medicine physician worked. And this guy was a normal Joe guy, and this is the way it works, and he's been doing it 34 years, and it works 100% of the time in these people. So that's how I got into it, and then I've been implementing it in my practice. It works very, very well. Of course, I'm the nail that sticks up the highest, and I've had a lot of ridicule, but that's pretty much stopped now because the patients that do this get better. And so all the physicians look at me and are like, okay, well, what do we do with this guy? I don't know if we can get rid of him, but I guess he's probably good in some respects because there are people that do want to change their lifestyles, and then there's those people that don't. They want to continue their lifestyle and take all the meds. So that's kind of my background. There's a lot more to that, but that's kind of the basis of it. So I know that we're going to be cut for time. I know some people need to leave early. I've got a lot on this slide, so if I might skip over it, it's got a lot of physiology into it, and that can be ad nauseum for a lot of people. But we'll just go through it. So basically, I'm board certified in family medicine and cardiac ultrasound. So I've been doing cardiac ultrasound for over 20 years. So that's what I do in our local community. I read for Mercy Hospital and also my own patients. So prevent, stop, and reverse chronic disease. Yes, you can do that. And I'll talk about this kind of basic. I'll show you in this how you can prevent and reverse heart disease just as an overview, right? Prevent, control, and reverse type 2 diabetes, and some people may disagree, but I'll show them some studies. Stop and reverse cancer and lower your cholesterol without medication. And yes, you can do this, you just have to be willing to do it. I'll also show you and prevent and stop many autoimmune diseases. This has been an amazing thing for me to see people reverse their lupus and stop the progression of rheumatoid arthritis and hypothyroidism, multiple sclerosis, and even prevent and stop dementia. But these are things you also have to start earlier in life, and the earlier the better. So as I say, people are like, oh, how is this possible? What's the catch? What are you selling? You know, you've heard all this bag of goods before. You know, I'm going to have some product in the back. Well, you can only do this if you buy this $150 package. It's sitting right for you. No, that's not how you do this. So I'm not selling anything. As they say, no thing. I'm here to teach you. That's what doctor means. It's Latin for docere, which means to teach. So hopefully that's what you'll learn. So I basically go back to the father of medicine, Hippocrates, that said, let food be thy medicine. And there was a lot of truth to that back then. And we're talking, what, 460 to 370 BC there. So the story begins. This is Colin Campbell, who you know is going to be speaking here February 8th. Is that correct? He's still coming, right? And his whole background was in cancer, you know, and as you see here, his interest was in cancer, how it started, how it grew, and ultimately how it killed people. And this brought him into, well, let me go back actually, grew up on a meat and dairy farm, eating bacon, eggs, cheese, milk, meat, all this wonderful stuff, delish, right? But then he found out that any animal protein above 5% in your diet promotes cancer. That's, let's see if I get the slide here. Sometimes it's a little delayed. That's 1 meal a week. So 1 meal a week, there it is, that's all you get. Anything beyond that, you're going to start promoting cancer. So that's what he figured out. So before we get into this, there's another interesting thing is that all his colleagues made fun of him. And he talks about him in the China study. There's about a paragraph about him. They're all dead or have dementia. He's 78 years old, internationally renowned speaker, and will be here in February speaking about this. So it's kind of his little vindictive way of getting back. So how did he figure all this out? So he looked at protein intake in cancer. He looked at that, at how it affected rats. The reason we use rats is rats mimic humans. About 80% of what happens with rats happens in humans, and they only live 2 years. So whatever happens to them, hopefully we can extrapolate out, maybe do a human study. So that's what he did. And what he found was, this is cancer development. So we're looking at cancer development by dietary protein intake. And the protein they're using here is the milk protein casein, which is 80% of the protein in milk. And they looked at the dietary protein intake, and adequate protein for body growth is about 10%. That's the same for humans. So that's where they like to see, and what's your rate of cancer? It's about 8%. But what happens when you go to just increasing your protein to 12%? You increase your risk of cancer development to 22%. That's huge. You just almost tripled your rate, right? And that's only a 2% increase. So what happens if you go to 14% increase, or 14% of your diet? Now you come from 22% to 70%. And then you go to 20%, and now 85% of the people that have that much protein in their diet are turning on all the genes that are promoting cancer. And they're going to get cancer. It's just a matter of when. So they also did this study with plant protein. And that was very important because they wanted to show that, or see really, if plant protein had the same effect. And what did it? Well, here's the one with the 20% milk protein. And we're looking at about 75–80% would promote cancers. Then they did it with 5% milk protein, and you can see we're way down here at maybe 8% would get cancers, kind of in the genetic range. Genetics works in between the 5 and 10% range. And then they looked at wheat protein. A 20% wheat protein diet only promoted cancer about 15%. So a lot lower than your 20% milk protein. Then they did more studies, and they found it's the same thing with all animal protein. Any animal protein now is understood. Anything above the 5% of your diet starts turning on the cancer genes. So how long does cancer have to grow before we see it with the most sensitive imaging? Anybody have a wild guess really quick so we can? Yeah, 10 years. So remember, you have to start out one little cancer cell, and that cancer cell has to double and keep doubling and doubling, and before we can actually see it, it takes 10 years. And then if we talk about slow cancers, it can be even longer, but that's 10 years. So all this work led to the China study, which you've already heard me allude to. So this is what Dean Ornish. Anybody heard about Dean Ornish? Dean Ornish is one of the leaders in this industry. I mean, Medicare pays for the Dean Ornish diet now. For the last 2 years, Dean Ornish has gotten Medicare to throw $3,500 at him and teach people how to eat plants. Well, why? Because Dean Ornish in 1990 showed you reverse heart disease, plant-based diet, reverse diabetes on a plant-based diet in the late 90s, elongate your life in the early 2000s, and then in 2010, reverse prostate cancer, a plant-based diet. And now he's in the middle of doing the same thing with breast cancer. So that's pretty powerful stuff. Here's what he says about this book, and that's why I wanted to go on that background, is everyone in the field of nutrition science stands on the shoulders of Dr. Campbell, who is one of the giants in the field. This is one of the most important books about nutrition ever written, and reading it may save your life. Pretty powerful statements from the guy that's been doing this his whole career on proving this. So anyway, what is the China study? The China study's background is it followed 6,500 Chinese in rural and semi-rural China between the age of 35 and 64 for 10 years, but effectively 30, where about 95% didn't migrate. Why is that important? Because now you got to see exactly what they ate, how it affected them. And what they did was when those people died, they'd autopsy them. And the people that ate plants, the healthiest people, were the poor people. They might have died from lack of immunizations or dysentery, but they didn't die from chronic diseases. So when they'd autopsy them, they didn't have cancers, diabetes, heart disease. They had nothing. But as the people, what did I got down here? Was the people got a little bit of cash, they bought the cow. So the healthiest people, this is what they're going to talk about. The healthiest people are the poor. Why? Because they ate rice and vegetables. They didn't have the money to buy the cow. But as they got increased affluence, they have the cash, they bought the cow. and now they had the milk, the cheese, and all the yummy meat. So what did they start to see? You already know where I'm going with this. We already started the heart disease, the diabetes, the cancer. And one of the things that anybody that takes on the American diet is also going to die like the Americans, and that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize. And so this is out of the China study, and what they showed was, this is from the United States, but the leading cause of death in the United States, this is in the year 2000, was heart disease, next cancer, and strokes, and that's exactly what they saw the richest people in those countries. When they took on the American diet, they died from diseases of the heart, cancer, and diabetes. One interesting thing I like to show, though, look at the third leading cause of death. Medical care. That beats out strokes. Now that's powerful stuff. So you can either take the risk and go for medical care, maybe change your diet and kind of eliminate all these problems. So there's another wonderful person that I'm going to talk about, and it's Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. You may have heard this name if you've come across the China study, but this is one of his patients. And Dr. Esselstyn also grew up on a meat and dairy farm and found out that all this stuff also promoted heart disease. So back at the Cleveland Clinic, he started treating people on a plant-based diet with very severe heart disease, people that they were told wouldn't live another 6 months to a year. And so this is what this is. This is a case study of one of the male surgeons at the Cleveland Clinic that had a heart attack and died twice on the cath lab table. Told him when he got awake that, sorry buddy, we can't do a bypass, it's too small to graft, we can't do multiple stents, there's nothing we can do for you, medical management only, go out to pasture and die like an old cow. Well, he's really depressed, wouldn't you? I mean, come on, 44 years old, his total cholesterol is 154, he's got no high blood pressure, no family history of heart disease, and yet here's this guy being told, that's it, that's all you got. So luckily, 3 doors down from him was Dr. Esselstyn, and Dr. Esselstyn had already been working with people with this, and he went and told him, he said, well, you know, I've had great success with these people that have been on a plant-based diet. You know, they're coming in with chest pain, and a week later I can get them to not have chest pain, and then 6 months later they're running 10Ks. Why don't you try this diet? So he did. He went and he tried this diet, and 2 years later he had another episode of chest pain that got all excited and scared, and they threw him in the cath lab, and this is what they found. This is before, and this is after. So in 2.5 years, he completely reversed his heart disease on a plant-based diet, which was pretty shocking. This is one of the best cases they've had. So there's Caldwell Esselstyn, and I'm going to show you another picture, and hopefully it shows up pretty well on this completely reversal of his heart disease. But the original study images, now this is crucial because there's something I want you to see. If you look at this diseased artery, I also want you to see what's not there. You don't see all these little collaterals. Look at this beautiful, look at all this blood flow. You don't see that here. So not only did he reverse this big arterial disease, he reversed disease down at the capillary level. And that's so important for you to really understand, is that this is only going to reverse the big stuff. It's going to reverse every capillary blood vessel problem in your brain all the way to your big toe. So let's see what we got here. Then the other thing is that Dr. Esselstyn, another interesting thing, was kicked him out of the Cleveland Clinic for doing this. And why would they kick a guy out that can reverse heart disease out of the Cleveland Clinic? Because if you aren't making money, the fear is you make everybody healthy, there's no money coming in, and so they didn't like that. But since then, he's done such great work, and the original people they had on the study, there was 24 of them, 17 stayed on the plant-based diet. They were told they weren't going to live 6 months to a year, and they're now still alive 24 years later. People that went off that, well, heart attack, bypass, you know the story. But now they voted him the #1 living Cleveland Clinic doctor and #3 of all time. And interestingly, my wife and I got to go meet these people, and one of the questions I asked Dr. Esselstyn when I was there, I said, well, did they vote you the #1 because you did such great work, or just because you outlived everybody? He said, both. So I can go into a lot of the physiology, but in the sake of time, I'm not going to do it. I can talk about all the epithelial, the endothelial cells and how they really function. But so you're going to see me go through this. These are the, let me do some quick stuff. So basically the endothelial cells are the janitors of your cells. They work really, really hard at keeping that artery very clean. And every time that you have a fatty meal or you have an animal protein meal, you actually stun them for about 6 to 10 hours. That's okay if you eat that way 1 day a week, but if you're eating that 3 times a day, you know, bacon and eggs for breakfast, chicken for lunch, steak for dinner, they're completely in a stupor and they never get a chance to actually keep that artery clean. And that's where the problem comes in, and years and years and years later, that's where you end up having a lot of these arterial clogs. There's a picture of endothelial cells. There's a lot of, this is the whole physiology behind it. I won't go into that. But if you can see, this is an old picture, but this is interesting, okay? Endothelial damage. You damage those little janitors, they can't clean your artery. And what this says damage right here? Western diet. And they're talking about how what causes damage to the endothelial cells: diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, tobacco. But look at that key word, reversible. We now know that. It's a reversible problem. All right, so this is a crazy in-depth about how it all works. I'm not going to go into that, but that's all the physiology and more physiology about how it works. And it's interesting if you ever want to get really into it. All right, so the next thing I'm going to show you is a video, and I think it really brings home the point about how your diet affects how the blood flow through your arteries. And through John McDougall, a friend of mine, he sent me a video that was created by Roy Swank. Now, Roy Swank was a neurologist at Oregon Health Sciences that started in the 1950s reversing multiple sclerosis on a plant-based diet with very low saturated fats. In fact, he has since passed, but his original studies have really helped a lot of people. In fact, they're doing a study right now with Dr. McDougall about reversing MS on a plant-based diet. But again, why isn't that known? Because you can't patent plants. All right, so here's this. Let's see if we can get this. So I want you, this is a little hamster, and hamsters eat what? Plants. And so this is its blood flowing through its little capillaries. They took its intestine, put it over a microscope, and viewed it, and you get to see the blood flow. The blood is just screaming through the capillaries. Then they inject a little fatty meal into its mouth, and it slows to a crawl. The analogy is, think of 20-50 weight oil on a minus 40-degree day. It's not moving through the arteries at all. So it really makes you start to understand this is, if you put this in your body, you're going to do damage to your arteries. In fact, this is interesting. This just came up today. Yahoo News. And I'm going to read this for you. But a high-fat diet is linked to increased risk for atherosclerosis. But the study suggests that damage that could lead to a heart attack or stroke may start sooner than previously thought. Just one day of eating a fat-laden breakfast sandwich such as egg, cheese, and ham sandwich on a bun, and your blood vessels become unhappy. But while the effects of a single meal were temporary over time, such arterial changes could set the stage for heart attack or stroke. They used a test called blood flow velocity, and that's what they're looking for. And they found that the higher the velocity, the happier the blood vessels are, and they will not get as disease as much. So this is a great question I like to ask to people, because you've been hearing this, and I'm sure I'll probably ruffle a few others. But do carbs cause diabetes or fat? So I just want you to ponder that thought for a second. We're going to go through some stuff here. All right. So this is actually an epidemiologic study done back in 1925, diets and diabetic and death rates. And here what we're looking at, 1925, okay, we've known that you can actually have lower diabetes in 1925 by eating more carbs and not fats. And that's what they show here: carbohydrate, fat intake, diabetes, and death rate. And here in Japan, you know, what do they have? I think they've got this all pretty much. About 90% of their diet is carbohydrates, and only about 6% is fat. And yet, they have the lowest death rate from diabetes. But as you start to decrease the carbohydrates and you increase the fats here, what happens to the death rate in the middle? Goes up. The more fat, the more you die from diabetes. Well, who was the leader in the world back then? Us. We were the #1 killers in diabetes in 1925. And it looks like there was a lot more fat in our diet than these poor little Japanese that weren't dying from this stuff at all. So again, ponder the thought: do carbs cause diabetes or fats? So let's go next door to Italy, because they have the Mediterranean diet, the pastas, the breads, the potatoes, the salads, and the olive oil. Everybody loves their olive oil. Well, let's see what happens, at least in this epidemiologic study, is that Japan had 6% fat in the diet, and you go to Italy, and they increase it to 20% fat in the diet. And what happens? You go from 2.5 deaths to 8. And what's that mean? You just tripled the death rate just by adding your fats. And when you actually look at the Mediterranean diet, the original Mediterranean diet was done in the 1950s in post-war Crete. And those people, if you ask them anything, like, what would you want? They'd say food, because they're starving. And when they looked at their actual diet, their calorie intake was so low, and these people lived on an island that they had to walk up and down, and they had to farm that sucker, and all the olive oil they had in their diet at the time was 2 tablespoons. If you go back and look today, the same rate of heart disease, diabetes, cancer as the United States, basically have taken on the United States diet. 1925. Kind of crazy, huh? Guess olive oil is not so good for us, like they say. So, do carbs cause diabetes or fats? Good question, huh? Something to keep pondering. Well, here's another study that they did. This was actually in 1986, where we took type 1 patients and type 2 patients. Type 1 don't make any insulin at all, and type 2 don't make enough. And so what they did here was they put them on a high carbohydrate, high fiber diet. It's very low in fat, and both of these groups started out at 28 units of insulin. Let's see, I forget. So high carbohydrate. I forget what some of these slides are, so bear with me here. So type 1 diabetics drop their insulin by 41% in only 2.5 weeks. That's 18 days. Here we are. They go from 28 and they go to about 18 units. They've dropped 10 units in only 2.5 weeks. And then when we look at the type 2 patients, they go from 28 units to 5 units in only 2.5 weeks. And after 6 weeks, they come off their insulin medication. The type 2 diabetics drop their insulin dose to nothing, and all but one patient were able to stop their insulin medication in 6 weeks, 1986. So we're still telling people, watch your carbs. Keep eating that fat. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Yeah, oh, it's 1986. So do carbs cause diabetes or fat? Fats cause diabetes. We now know that, the physiology behind it. We've got studies that back that up. And so we try to get people, and I've seen this in my office, I get people a lot off the fat so I can really see their insulin use go down, or in the case of type 2 diabetes, come off their medications altogether. But how does fat cause diabetes? So this is a basic overview of the physiology, but real quick. So this is, I think we've got this little animated, you're going to see the cell wall there, then you got the blood on the outside, inside the cell, and then when you eat, what happens, your blood sugar goes up, and as your blood sugar goes up, signals the pancreas to produce insulin. Insulin comes down, hits the receptors. It causes this crazy, complex intra-signaling cascade that causes the pores to open up and then the blood sugar to move in. All right? So let's see if I can do this correctly. So we'll do this one more time. Right? Cell wall, blood, inside the cell wall. What happens? You eat a wonderful meal like President Obama there. It increases the sugars produce insulin, insulin comes down, hits the receptors, causes this crazy intra-signaling cascade, which causes the pores to open up and the sugar to come in. But then you add a wonderful Big Mac to that meal, and that fat gets right inside the cell, and guess what it does? It inhibits the whole process, the whole intra-signaling cascade, and blocks those pores. So as you see here, the sugar keeps building up and building up and building up, and that's how you start increasing your sugars, and then you burden the pancreas, and then it gets burnt out, and then pretty soon you've got full-blown diabetes. So if fats cause diabetes, why does everyone keep telling us to watch our carbs? So this is how complex the actual intra-signaling cascade is from insulin when it hits that receptor. Right here, here's all the physiology. If that doesn't look complex, I don't know what is. Mind-blowing, right? So can you reverse diabetes? Well, according to this study that was published in Diabetologia in 2011, you can. Reversal of type 2 diabetes, normalization of beta cells. Now, beta cells are the ones that produce insulin. What they did was they put these people on a 600-calorie diet, and over the length of this study, which was very short, I think it was only 6 to 8 weeks, they showed that they could double the insulin production from their beta cells. That's reversing diabetes. That's making those beta cells work better, and hence, and you know what, they got the idea for this study because they had done gastric bypass on people, and gastric bypass people were showing the same thing with their beta cells. So they said, hey, let's do it by just changing their diet. See if we don't have to staple their stomach. All right, so if you guys do this, one of the things you're going to ask, and you ask your physician or anybody, is where do you get your protein, right? Yeah, my God, I can't tell you. If I had a penny, I would have all my school debt paid off. How many times I've heard that question? All right, well, where does the elephant, giraffe, rhino, hippo, cow, moose, elk, pig, deer, gazelle get their protein? And if you actually look at their intestines pretty much match our intestinal length. They get it from plants, right? They get everything they need from the plants. Oh, I know what you're saying, Dr. Bennie, yeah, but there's got to be something different, right? Well, let's do it scientifically where we compare actual plants versus animals. So you're going to have to bear with me because I don't have this animated as much, but here what we did was we took plant-based foods and animal-based foods on a 500-calorie diet. And then we took equal parts of tomatoes, spinach, lima beans, peas, and potatoes, and compared that to equal parts of beef, pork, chicken, whole milk. Ground up all the components and measured them. So how much cholesterol in plants? None. Plants don't make cholesterol, they make fiber for their cell walls. But you, me, and everyone else in the world, what do we make? We make cholesterol for our cell walls, we don't make fiber. So the minute we stop eating each other, guess what? Our cholesterol goes down to what our body intended us for to make, and you have normal bowel movements. Fat, 4 grams of unsaturated fat to 36 of saturated. Saturated fat increases your risk for all cancers and adds to the burden of cholesterol. And here you go, protein, 33, 34. That's right, tomatoes, spinach, lima beans, peas, and potatoes has the same amount of protein as beef, pork, chicken, and whole milk. Maybe that's how the cow, the pig, and the chicken can get as big as they need to get. Then we can go through all this. Beta carotene, 30,000 micrograms to 17. Dietary fiber, 31 to 0. 293 of vitamin C to 4. And a whopping amount of phytonutrients. I'll kind of skip over that. But I want to go down here to the calcium because we're always here that milk does the body good, does your bones good, even though you won't see that anymore because it's been found to be false advertising and you've taken it off. But 252 milligrams of calcium in milk to 545 in plants. What? Twice as much? Well, yeah, think about it. The cow eats the plant, saves half the calcium for its own teeth and bones, and gives you the other half as milk. So why don't you eliminate the middle cow and go straight to the source? So if you take this and make it as a 2,000 calorie diet, multiply everything times 4, now you have 2,000 milligrams calcium, magnesium, whopping amounts of phytonutrients, 140 grams of protein. RDA for male, 50 to 55 grams. If you're a bodybuilder, 60 to 65 grams. Females, 40 to 45 grams. Bodybuilders, about 55 to 60 grams. That's 140. Are you getting enough protein? Oh yeah, more than enough. So they've just spelled that. And then we talk about Medicare. Medicare now pays for this type of diet. If you went to the Pritikin Lifestyle Centers, or you went to the Dean Ornish down at UCSF, or any one of the certified providers, they pay them $3,500 if you have heart disease to teach you how to eat plants. Why would they do that? Well, Medicare figured it out that if you can reverse one stent, you're going to save 80 grand. A coronary bypass, $150,000. And when you start thinking about in the terms of big dollars, elephant dollars, so to speak, you stop diabetes, you also stop dementia, you stop autoimmune disorders, cancers, reverse all that heart disease. Medicare will save billions to trillions of dollars. Their actual estimate is you've got everyone in the United States to go plant-based, you would reduce our healthcare expenditures by 75%. That would decrease just yearly $500 to $900 billion saved every single year. Powerful, powerful stuff. And would there be a healthcare crisis? Absolutely not. In conclusion, toss it. All this stuff, you don't need this. Even though you might like it, you really probably shouldn't be eating it, at least with what I've told you. And in my practice, the people that do this lifestyle have seen absolute fantastic results. The people that don't see fantastic results are the people that don't do it. Like I've had people come in and I watch their cholesterol go up and some other numbers and I say, well, are you doing this? Oh yeah, Dr. Bennie, I'm strict vegan, man, strict. Oh, you wouldn't believe, I haven't seen meat. And then you pick apart their diet and you find out, oh, you went to In-N-Out 4 times last month? Oh, you've been eating out 3 or 4 times a week? Oh, Snickers and M&Ms, but you're a strict vegan. So it's very funny to hear, but it takes me time to go through this and then their heads are like this when they walk out, I still can't eat meat. So, but in conclusion, lots and lots and lots of plants. They're absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it's all these different colors. You've got to find something you like. Don't be afraid to experiment with this lifestyle. Don't be stuck in a rut because it gets to be a rut. You can ask my wife. We have what are we going to cook tonight? I don't want to have the same thing, but you can do the same thing with me. What are we going to have? Steak, chicken, pork? What am I getting? Eggs? Oh, we got to rotate those. It's the same thing. You're going to get locked in those things. You just have to be willing to try new stuff. And then these are just some of the people. These are the famous people that you're all going to recognize that have all gone vegan or plant-based. There's President Clinton, Steve Jobs, Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Einstein was a vegetarian, and there's even more that have really been switching because I think the data is getting out there. I think the people really want to have, especially actors, they want to look the youngest, the longest, and be the healthiest, so they've really adopted this lifestyle. So it's not an all-inclusive club. Anybody can do this. You don't have to have type A, B, Q blood. You don't have to be red, black, yellow, or white. You can be any color and just it works for everybody. The other thing is that it's not about quantity. It's about quality. So I like to use this. If you do want to have meat, have it very rarely and have good quality meat. Don't buy pink slime at your McDonald's. Really go down to Kent's Meat Market. There's another one somebody's telling me out today, and get a small, tiny piece of it and enjoy it. That's the way you're not going to feel deprived, and it's going to be the most successful for you. So you don't like, oh God, that crazy vegan doctor, you can't have any meat. No, you can have it, but you really need to minimize it. And now you guys understand why. The other thing is that it's not about living longer with this diet. It's about living better. And that's what it's all about. I've never had a patient that goes, doctor, I'd really like to be 100,000 years old. No one wants to live to be 100,000 years old. But they all want to live better all the time they're here. And I've always said I want to live that square wave of life. I don't want to, at 80 years old, have a heart attack and live the next 10 to 15 years of my life really in a debilitated state. I want to live that whole life until it's time to go and have it be done with. And that's what everybody wants. You know, when you talk to them about their kids, you want to see your kids grow up, you want to see them have grandkids, you want to experience them, you don't want to be a total invalid and have dementia and not remember any of it anyway. So what can you expect? You can lower your cholesterol naturally, you can reduce your blood sugars, you'll feel more energetic, have less pain, sleep better, you'll lose weight consistently while feeling full. Very important, if you do this, you have to eat a lot of food. Now, the trick is you can't put fats on the food. You put fats on the food, that's going to totally sabotage this whole thing. But if you go to a whole food, plant-based diet, very low in fats, just like what we've been kind of seeing here, then you're going to really maximize weight loss, and you're going to feel full and satisfied, and your energy level is going to be through the roof. So don't feel like you have to suppress you don't have to do the reversing the diabetes at a 600-calorie diet unless it's something you really need to do. But it also improves your thinking. There's tons of studies now showing it improves athletic performance, and it's just everything it seems to benefit. There's just not one thing I haven't seen it benefit yet. And thanks to Dr. McDougall, I work with Dr. McDougall. He's a wonderful guy. He's been my mentor. That's from the last Whole Foods McDougall program. Just a fantastic guy. I will tell you that when he does these immersion programs, so he does them for 3, 5, and 10 days, and my patient panel, I had 23 patients that I followed, and in 5 days, whole food plant-based diet, no nuts, seeds, oils, avocados, meats, right? Oh, it sounds horrible, but it's delicious food, everybody's happy. I had one patient that dropped her cholesterol 90 points, most of them were between 30 and 60 points in only 5 days. So now if you do this, you've got 90 days, you should be able to push it rock bottom if you really want to. So it's definitely a positive thing for you if you do this. Thank you. Questions? Any questions?
Not yet.
All right, so I do want to go over one more thing, and I know I'm walking. Do you have those little plant-based things, the packets? I'm sorry. Can you grab me?
Yeah.
Can I have one? Because I want to go over it real quick. Oh, I just want to, so a lot of this stuff they'll look at and they'll say, well, what does this really mean? But this is, since you're videotaping it, it'll work out better. All right, so I don't know if you can get this on videotape. So the very first one of this, everybody have this flyer. You're going to see this has the picture of the China study, so you have that. But right below it is a really important movie. It's called Forks Over Knives. The analogy is if you don't change what you're putting on your fork, we're going to cut it out with a scalpel, right? But in that 1.5 hour video, you can stream it over Netflix, Hulu. You can buy it off Amazon for 13 bucks. You'll see a bunch of patients that have high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, breast cancer, high cholesterol, obesity, and they all reverse it on the plant-based diet. So it's great. And you'll also meet 3 very important people. You'll meet Dr. Campbell in it, you'll meet Dr. Esselstyn, and you'll meet Dr. McDougall, who's on the back here. So a really great resource. There's also some other great things. There's lots of free stuff. Dr. McDougall pretty much gives his whole program away free. You do not have to pay the $5,000. If you really want to spend the time reading, you can do it at home on your own, drmcdougall.com. He has lots of free videos too about why you don't want milk, the pus in your diet, and we didn't even get into that. Let's do that. I want to do this because this is important. This will kind of cure you from the dairy. 1 tall glass of milk has 360 million pus cells and 1 million bacteria. Why is that? Because commercial grade cows live, eat, and sleep on their own feces. So when their udders or the breast, right, hits the ground, bacteria love what? Sugar. And that udder's full of all that lactose. They're excited. They crawl right up that udder, get into the milk supply, and then what happens? The body knows that's an infection. It throws white blood cells. White blood cells killing bacteria make what? Pus. So they asked the Dairy Council, they said, why do you allow 360 million pus cells in a big tall glass of milk? They said, what's the problem? It's pasteurized. I said, well, let's all sit back and have a sterile glass of pus and bacteria. I mean, that's like me coming up to your glass of water and popping a zit in it and throwing it in the microwave and said, oh, don't worry, it's sterile. I sterilize it in the microwave. So I just wanted to give you a great graphic idea of what they do, right? And there's a million other things that are horrible in it, but that's probably the grossest one. All right, and on this, there's also Dean Ornish. Dean Ornish, as you already know, is his website. Medicare agreed to provide coverage. Go to his website, read about it. It's great work. Yeah, he's doing fantastic stuff. And then another really excellent website is nutritionfacts.org. Dr. Greger went to the same school as Dr. Campbell at Cornell University. He reviews between 7,000 and 10,000 nutrition research articles every single year. Monday through Friday puts out a 2 to 3 minute video on those research studies, and they're highly entertaining, easy to watch. And what I always tell my patients is don't listen to me. Please take the time and educate yourself. Everybody can do 2 to 3 minutes by just watching a simple video, and then you can click and read the research and educate yourself, and pretty soon you've got such a mountain of evidence that anybody comes and asks you, where do you get your protein? You just kind of laugh at them and say, read this, because this is too much information. So a really good resource, so do that. Then there's another sheet in here, and I don't know if you can zoom in on this, but lots of foods. They're not all the best foods, okay? Some of them are high in fats, but I have transitional foods in here, but they're all plant-based, okay? Veganase is wonderful. I have 5 professional chefs that have shifted to it, but it's pure canola oil, so it's fat. So if you have diabetes and you're trying to reduce your diabetes, I wouldn't be sitting down spooning out the Veganase, okay? Minimize the fats, and you really have to learn to read labels, and that's a whole other course. So lots of good stuff on there. And then instead of the pus, you can have milks that don't have pus in it, like almond milk, soy milk, oat, hemp, rice. Sprouted grain breads from Trader Joe's, really wonderful, no animal products, very low in fat. And then these are restaurants you can eat out in our local community. And yes, I put Domino's Pizza on there. And yes, I put Subway, and yes, I put Taco Bell. There are choices that you can make. You can click Domino's Pizza with no cheese. You call them up and say, please don't put butter on it either, because they'll soak it in it. But you can have, and there's no animal products in the crust. So you can make better choices with stuff that you can find in any town USA and make this a healthier lifestyle, so you don't feel like you're the odd man out when you go out. Then there, at the very bottom, there's thousands of free recipes. You go to md.org. You can click on breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a whole week, and it actually prints out a shopping list for you, so, with everything, all the condiments. So great stuff. And then there's another thing I won't go ad nauseum, but Jeff Novick has worked with these people for a long time. He's a fantastic educator, registered dietitian. This is off 2 of his DVDs. This was Fast Food, how you can create 5 meals, 10 minutes or less, using canned beans, canned tomatoes, frozen vegetables, rice, and pasta. Very simple stuff. You can go anywhere again and create them, like I said, in 10 minutes or less, but also has shopping tips and hints in it. Then there's another one in here. It's fast food, burgers and fries. You can make your own vegetarian burgers in a very short time, 30 cents a piece. So if anybody wants to come and start talking about cost, oh, Dr. Bennie is so expensive, I can't eat that way. No, it's cheaper than buying your beef and your chicken, that's for sure. Fantastic Factoids. The Fantastic Factoids is a great, lots of great information in it. In the very back, you guys, I want to turn you to that, and I'm going to do this real quick because I want you guys, one thing we're going to talk about, I want to talk about inflammation, because if you're coming here because you have pain, pain is a horrible thing that I get to experience every day, because all my patients come to me when they have pain. They don't usually come when they're good. So we're going to talk about arachidonic acid, and arachidonic acid is the precursor to all inflammation in your body. It's important you remember that, like arachidonic acid. So the Institutes of Medicine, National Academies of Health and Sciences, they go do these studies called the National Health and Nutrition Examination Surveys. And they looked at all the sources of arachidonic acid, because if you have arachidonic acid in your body, you have inflammation. You have inflammation, you have pain. But your body makes all the arachidonic acid you'll ever need in your whole lifetime. You don't need more. Because if you have more inflammation, you have more pain. Well, they went and looked at all the foods that have it. Plants don't make arachidonic acid. So what's number 1 on the list? Chicken. 27% of chicken is pure inflammation in their little embryos. Eggs, number 2, at 18%. So if you want to have inflammation and pain, by all means, eat your chicken and eggs. And poor little malign beef that everybody talks about is 1/4 the inflammatory load of chicken. So that's important that you understand that. And then we're going to talk about cholesterol, because everybody's like, well, Dr. Bennie, I don't eat meat. I just eat chicken and eggs. Okay, well, I'm trying to always figure that one out. I don't know how chicken got to be not meat. But so the Institutes of Medicine went and looked at cholesterol levels in foods. And again, you know, plants don't make cholesterol. What's number 1 on the list? Eggs. 25% of eggs, pure cholesterol. Chicken. 13%. Beef, poor malign beef, again, 3rd. So the 2 worst things put in your body for more inflammation and more cholesterol are chicken and eggs, what they tell us to eat all the time. You know, don't think there's like a little marketing ploy there, right? All right, so I think that's important. So now you understand that. That's in that packet. There's a little handout that's printed out with the permission of Dr. McDougall from the Starch Solution. If you're going to adopt this lifestyle, how to make it most effective for you. If you do this lifestyle, it's very important you get B12, vitamin D if you don't get enough sun, and iodine. But this is the research that Dr. Greger has been able to pull up that you would need in your diet, so you can read that. This is an editorial from Dean Ornish, Mostly Plants, why you should eat this way and why your physician should actually teach it to you. And then this is the dietary outline from the China study, what all the healthiest people ate, all the fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, beans, legumes, and it tells you to eliminate, minimize the oils and eliminate all the animal protein. And then another wonderful packet called a Vegetarian Starter Kit. It's put out by PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, who's Neil Bernard, who's a fantastic hard worker at Washington, D.C., that really lobbies against a lot of this stuff so we know the truth. But it shows you a lot of things in here, like how to have a healthy heart, lower your blood pressure, control your diabetes, prevent cancer, and it goes through everything you could possibly imagine, and in the back there is more recipes. So I'll open that up. I hope that clears up what's in this packet so you understand it, because I know when I just talk, if I don't give you something that supports you doing this, you're going to go home and say, what the heck am I going to do now? What do you want me to cook? You know what? Carl's Jr.'s down the road. I'm out the door. So I want you to make it successful. That's my whole point. So any questions?
One comment. Forks over knives is free if you belong to Amazon Prime.
Oh, there you go. There you go. I did not know that.
We're going to be bringing that. So Friday, February 8th is our luncheon. We're having a go ready for the luncheon, but that night at the Cascade Theater, we're going to show that forks over knife free.
Excellent. Excellent.
So that's part of just the educational part. But that's
All right.
good to know.
Any other questions? Don't be afraid.
Fats, nuts, seeds.
Uh-huh.
Did I misunderstand what you said about?
It just, so it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to maximize, reversing heart disease and diabetes and trying to lose weight, then you want to maximize not having those in your diet. Because if you listen to Dr. Esselstyn, moderation kills. No oil. If you ever listen to it, he's a funny guy. And it's true, because I tell somebody, I just want you to have an ounce. Okay, that's a shot glass of nuts and seeds a day. That's important. And the only thing it's really important for is omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Those are essential. That means we can't make them in our body. We have to get them in our diet. And the research has shown how much of those do we need to be healthy? 3 walnuts a day, 1 tablespoon of flaxseed oil, or a tablespoon of flaxseed. That's it. We don't need any other omega-3 and omega-6 in our diet. But what are they telling you? Pour it all over. So what happens? I tell somebody, oh, just have an ounce. And they're like, well, 2 ounces won't hurt me. Oh, just twist off the can. Pretty soon, you wake up in the morning and you wonder who knocked you over the head and ate all those nuts. When you realize it was yourself, right? So that's the thing, it's what you're trying to maximize. It's not that you can't have it, but the more you minimize it, the more you maximize the outcome. Come on. Sugar, what you said, go back, I'll remember that. You said avocados? Avocados are great. Let me tell you an experience about a patient of mine that had type 2 diabetes that went on a plant-based diet. Hemoglobin A1C went from 6.5 to 8.3. Strict vegan, I was able to corroborate that through the blood urea nitrogen. What was she eating? 2 bowls of guacamole a day. It's a fat. So she was putting all this fat in her, and it just gets in the cell. And it just completely blocks that whole insulin thing. So again, minimizing it, you'll even see that with Dr. McDougall. If you want to have it, 1 little tiny slice a week, and then you're going to maximize it, because we're trying to reverse all these. But if you're somebody who's healthy, and you don't have to worry about all these other problems, then you can have a little bit more. But my patients, I don't usually see the healthiest people walking in, and I'm trying to get them to maximize that, and I try to say, just keep it as low as you can. It's not you can't have it, but the more you minimize, you're going to maximize the effects out of it. Sugar.
Yeah, and I know refined sugars are terrible, but how about organic sugars?
Yeah, so there's a couple things there, but let's just say that sugar and salt are what I feel the scapegoats of society. So if I take people and I take them off meat and dairy, and I let them have salt and sugar, they don't die of heart disease. They don't die of high cholesterol. They don't die of strokes. It just doesn't happen. But if you keep them on those things, you give them that, it's a problem. And so we see that. So when you go to Dr. McDougall's, guess what he has on the table? Salt. You can put sugar on these brown sugar sitting right there when you have in your oatmeal. Because those are the scapegoats. Sugar is actually an insulin sensitizer. It makes insulin work more effectively. And a lot of people don't know that. So I know this is not what we're told, is it? I mean, we're told all these horrible things. The DASH diet. Oh my God, I listened to that on the radio. Oh my God, I'm going to have salt. I'm going to die. No, you can have all the salt. I tell people to do that. But I tell them try not to cook with it. Because when you're cooking and you cook for 3-4 hours, you're making something, it's like, oh, it's still not salty enough. Oh, it's still not salty enough. But the trick is think of a potato chip. When you eat a potato chip, it's really salty. It's because the salt's on the outside. It doesn't really get into that chip. So if you throw your salt at the end when it's sitting on the dinner table, you get that wonderful sensation off your tongue that makes it taste salty, and then you minimize the intake. You still have to have salt in your diet. I mean, every muscle contraction, every neuronal process is all salt. And so that's why I think it's funny how it's meat and dairy, I'm sure it's doing that. I just like to blame them for everything. Anything else? Come on.
Coconut oil.
Oh, coconut oil, I love that. It's a great question. There was a wonderful study I did in 1991 that went and looked at some traditional diets where they had coconut oil in that, and they did it on flow-mediated vasodilation. Flow-mediated vasodilation, which you kind of heard me allude to, actually has to do with how the arteries dilate up. And when I was talking about how the blood vessels don't work, when they took this diet, they took a very low-fat diet. Then they took the traditional diet of, I think it was, like Tahitians that have a lot of coconut oil in it, and they compared that to McDonald's. Guess what happened? The coconut oil had the same detrimental effects and increases in the lipids as did the McDonald's hamburger. There was absolutely no difference. It promotes heart disease. And we don't see that with people that get away from that. Coconut water, totally different. Coconut water is exactly the same as plasma. You can actually hook an IV, pop it in your artery, and you could live if you're on some desert island and needed an IV. But coconut oil is not good for you like everybody said. And we've seen the cycle. It used to be good for you, then they found it was bad for you, and now all of a sudden it's good for you again. No, it's still bad for you. And that's what the data is well studied in that.
How about blood flow, that supplement they have out there? It says blood flow, blood flow, blood flow.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look at what's actually on the label in it, and I wish I could say blood flow. I don't. Maybe I should create a product, blood flow, right when you leave here.
It's here.
I am selling something, blood flow, but through a plant-based diet, right? So it's really, you just have to do it. I do have business cards. If you guys want to come see me in my office, you're more than welcome to do that. Please feel free. I support this wholeheartedly. And even if you don't, if you know people that don't want to do this, I support them anyway. But I always teach this. I think it's always important that they are educated and that they at least have the information. I mean, because if they have the information, they usually make better choices. If they don't, then I'm happy to plug them into the system and start writing the meds. And that's what happens, the lifetime of medications. And I have lots of patients like that. But that's their choice. And I totally respect that. That's what life is about. It's free will. You have the choice to do what you want. But you have to remember cause-effect. Your choices today affect what happens to you tomorrow. And if you're willing to take that risk, then go for it. But I see that all day long, and I'm not willing to take that risk. Especially my dad had his first heart attack at 47 years old, and I'm 47. So I'm not playing that game.
Are you teaching in the schools?
I haven't done that yet. I'm actually going to do a lecture here for Sequoia Middle School.
That would be awesome, because this is totally different than what I learned in school.
Right, well, yeah, and it's a problem because there's subsidies, and the subsidies require that they have to have milk available for them to get the, believe me, you know, PCRM, he's been doing this for 30 years. He's got letters you can send to your principal. You can go on that website, PCRM, letters already pre-formatted for principal, trying to get them to change, but you're dealing with the federal government. And that until we change that, until we change the $16 billion a year that we pay through our Congress and Senate to meat and dairy, when the National Institutes of Medicine is saying that stuff kills you. Until we stop that, we're not going to see that change. There's just too much to the good old boy club, unfortunately. No more questions? I'll throw out some cards up here if you want to come by my office. I'm up on, oh, thanks. Thank you very much.